on our document. I'm going to go on YouTube so the teachers that want to see this can also see this. Let's come here. Share, copy that link. All right, now on our document, I'm going to go on YouTube so the teachers that want to see this can also see this. Let's come here. Okay. We are going to start with our successes. We always want to start with our celebrations and the things that we are really being successful with. We are doing some really great things in our district right now, connecting with students. We have teachers and students and families that have exhibited great persistence, resilience. I mean, when you consider the technology issues we've had this week, the challenges that are huge, and we have been able to accomplish so many things. A lot of that we have from the resilience and persistence of our teachers. We have technology available to us today that we didn't have 5 years ago. You know, I think back to 5 years ago and what would have happened at that time if our pandemic would have hit then, and what we've been able to accomplish with the hard work and the effort that our teachers continue to put in and day out for our students and our families. We are truly blessed with many of those things, and our students are the ones that benefit the most from that. You know, I could spend a lot of time talking about the things that we have to work on, or I should say this, the things that we have been working on, and the things that we have just overcome. We could spend the next hour really talking about all the great things that we are doing. But that message cannot be one of the most important here today. That we are working hard, we are working at maximum effort. Some of us have even surpassed maximum effort. But that is one of the things, if you hear nothing else today, please understand that your hard work goes noticed every single day. We come to our why. We are on a learning journey. We are continuously pursuing our growth for all students. We find ourselves in, and we have this graphic, and you'll see this graphic throughout the presentation about things we wanted from a Hays learner. And this is on our website. We have a characteristic of an educator and a characteristic of a profile, I should say, of a learner and a profile of an educator. We took out a couple of the characteristics from the profile of a learner that we feel students need right now in order to be successful in this environment. We know they need the ability to problem solve. We know that they too have to discern, and it is challenging. The persons that they come to show can be challenging. It can be one that they might not have to otherwise. The confidence and the self-advocacy that they have to demonstrate, knowing if they have questions and how to be able to make sure that they are advocating for themselves is huge. And then not to mention the strong work ethic. We are asking a lot of ourselves, of our teachers and students and families, and we are equal to the challenge. Like we said, we as teachers are wearing many hats. We've got a student hat, we've got a teacher hat. Some of us are teacher parents with students that we are working with at home. or after school. Some of us are in person, some of us are virtual, some of us are teaching both. And so we've got a whole bunch of hats that we are wearing right now. What we're going to ask that you consider right now is put on your hat of a virtual learner, and we'll be thinking from the perspective of our virtual students. We have a short four-ish minute video that we're going to talk about user design. And when you are watching this video, I want you to think about any personal encounters you've had with user design. It might be related to education. It might not be related to anything on education. But think about user design as we're showing this. And when we talk about user experience, we're talking about the look of something, the feel of it, if it's user friendly, that has stood out to you. I will say there is a little colorful language in this video. This is not one I share with students. If you're a student appropriate one, I can find you one. But I figured
there's this door on the 10th floor of the.
Okay, before I continue on, can you hear that video?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Sometimes it changes when I put my headset
Oh,
on.
yeah.
Thank
The
you.
Vox Media office that I hate so much.
God damn it. You ever get this door wrong?
Pretty regularly.
Have you seen people misuse it?
All the time, every day. Constantly. I hate this.
Me too, Kelsey. But here's the thing. As soon as you start looking for confusing doors, they are everywhere.
It's push.
Why?
I feel like Roman Mars would know about this.
This is 99% invisible, and those doors you hate are called Norman doors.
What's a Norman door?
Don Norman wrote the essential book about design. He is the Norman of the Norman door.
All right, and where is this guy?
You must go to San Diego.
Okay. Hi, Joe.
Hey, I'm Don Norman. Gee, you know, it's hard to describe what I am.
Well, he's been a professor of psychology, professor of cognitive science, professor of computer science, a vice president of advanced technology at Apple. But for our purposes,
I was spending a year in England, and I got so frustrated with my inability to use the light switches and the water taps and the doors even, that I wrote this book.
If I continually get a door wrong, is it my fault?
No. In fact, if you continually get it wrong, is a good, and if other people continually get it wrong, good sign that it's a really bad door.
a Norman door is one where the design tells you to do the opposite of what you're actually supposed to do, or gives the wrong signal and needs a sign to correct it.
Why does it need an instruction manual? That is, why do you have to have a sign that says push or pull? Why not make it obvious?
It can be obvious if it's designed right.
There are a couple of really simple, basic principles of design, and one of them I'll call discoverability. When I look at something, I should be able to discover what operations I can do.
The principle applies to a whole lot more than doors.
And it's amazing with many of our computer systems today. You look at it, there's no way of knowing what's possible. Should I tap it once or twice or even triple tap? So discoverability, when it's not there, well, you don't know how to use something.
Another is feedback.
And so many times there's no feedback. You have no idea what happened or why it happened.
And these principles form the basis of how designers and engineers work today, commonly known as user or human-centered design.
I decided at one point the word user was a bit degrading. Why not call people people? And it's amazingly simple and amazingly seldom practiced. We call it iterative because it goes around in a circle. We go out and we observe what is happening today. We observe people doing the task. And from that we say, oh, we have some ideas. Here's what we should perhaps propose to do.
Then you prototype your solution and test it.
Quite often these are wrong at first, but each time we go around the circle, we do a better job of making the device until the point we're actually making something that really works.
And this process has spread all over the world.
And it turns out it's improving lives.
From better everyday things like the ones that Dawn wrote about.
To using the same process to solve huge problems in public health in developing countries.
Water,
Sanitation,
farming.
lots more. So would it be a better human-centered door?
An ideal door is one that as I walk up to it and walk through it, I'm not even aware that I had opened the door and shut it. So if you had, what could you do? Nothing. The only thing you can do is push. So see, you wouldn't need a sign. A flat plate, you push.
This kind of push bar with the piece sticking out on one side works well too, so you can see what side you're supposed to push on.
The vertical bars could go either way. A simple little hand thing, though, sort of indicates pull.
But we still have terrible, terrible doors in the world. So many of them.
There are lots of things in life that are fairly standardized, and therefore, whether I buy this house or not is not a function of whether it has good doors in it. And so, except for safety reasons, doors tend not to be improved.
But the tyranny of bad doors must end.
I think that it's a really shitty design. In fact, they put a pull handle when it's a push. And it should be a flat panel right here. And not a pull handle. That's how I feel about the store. It's very misleading.
I agree.
You're right, Becky. You're goddamn right. And if we all thought like you, well, we might just design a better world together.
It won't open because it's a security door.
What the f are you two doing?
Hey, so as you can see, since I...
Okay, we are gonna actually ask you guys, if you are having internet issues, like if you're having some spotty issues, if you'll turn off your video feed, that can help with some of the bandwidth issues that we're having. Now, if you're fine with that, that's fine. But if you are, as much as I love seeing your faces right now, it might help with our bandwidth issues that we're experiencing. So what I would like though, is that if anybody has a connection that they just, when they saw this, they were like, man, if you would, if you wouldn't mind sharing, I should say, I would love one person to share just a connection that they had with that video of any user design experience that they've experienced.
I put in the chat about the doors at convenience stores, how they lock the right side, but there's no sign on it.
I lost my sound on that one. Okay, one more time, Lane. Okay, I think he's muted. One thing I will say that when, as a volleyball coach at Hayes for a number of years, we would key the doors so that they could stay unlocked. So when our athletes were coming in from, fourth period or whatever, they could just run in. Well, there's two doors, and we keyed the inside right door because you go out of the right door, right? Well, from the outside, you don't go through the left door, you go through the right door. So it took us a little while for us to figure out that, wait, we need to be keying both doors so we can go in and out both of those doors because we're trying to go through the right. It just, we were talking about doors and I remember that immediate connection.
There's this door on the 10th floor.
No, I don't need to start that again. Okay, I'm gonna go here. So we come into this concept of iteration. If anyone out there is a reflective soul like myself, we go through this process constantly. When talking about even this particular presentation, this has been going through this cycle in my brain and in a lot of our brains for a number of weeks now. Because I keep going back to, okay, this is what we want to say, and then what are some possible feedback we could get, and then how would that adjust our design? And we go through that whole process. We can get caught up when we have so much to teach in the top half of this that we might lose feedback or sight of feedback or have time. Time is the most valuable to analyze the feedback that we've gotten. So we took this graphic and adjusted it from the one that you saw in the video to fit our world. And when we talk about at the beginning, when we talk about our goal is to show growth, we want our students to grow, and we know the rest of it will take care of them, take care of itself. Part of this process is that growth. We've got to be able to, once we implement, and that's one of the things I'm so excited about, having the stuff we've already created in Schoology, so that next year, don't kill me for saying that next year, but next year, we have our first semester course built. Now we can really spend the time going through, okay, this is how I want to implement it. How did it work last year? Did students understand the way that it was presented? Maybe not. Maybe I do have to make some tweaks and go through this cycle, because we don't have to spend as much of our time in the creation. So what I would like to do, I want to introduce you to the waterfall chat. If you haven't heard of this, a waterfall chat sounds exactly like what it is. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want in the chat box, I want you to type your response, but don't press enter. Wait until I say start. When I say start, then, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to type your answer. Then we'll get a waterfall of answers. Now, the reason I do that is I can save this chat. And as a teacher on the end, where I can search for the start, and then I can just read all of those responses together in the chat. I don't have to go searching through all of it. That's the purpose of and it just looks like a waterfall once it happens. So we want to take a couple minutes for you to think about, how does this cycle that we have right here fit into your current teaching practice? So I am going to give you, I'm going to put 1.5 minutes on my clock, and I want you to type your response in the chat, but do not press enter. So if you can type your answer to, how does this cycle fit into your current teaching practice, into the chat, but do not press enter. All right, if you have a response, I went ahead and typed start in my chat. Go ahead and press enter on yours and let the waterfall begin. All right, while we have these messages coming in, take a second to look through some of the messages and the wealth of knowledge and information coming through. Karina, I love it. Weekly madness and then daily tweaks. And Melissa, I agree. This is an ongoing process. And small changes make a huge difference. And Shannon, I agree. I think right now with the amount of input that we are having to create in our Schoology environment, I do see for our next year, when we are able to pull all of that information in, that rich content that we're working on right now, I think that will help drive us into our feedback and analyze, because we are spending so much in designing and planning and implementing right now. Awesome. I mean, we could legitimately spend the next 15 minutes going through all of these these great comments. So when we talk about user design experience, you guys have already talked about connecting this concept to teaching and how this fits into your PLC cycle already. We do have some examples that we are using right now as user experiences in our classrooms right now. This is just a couple. I know there are plenty more out there. Teachers are designers. I'm gonna pop through all of the bullet points here. We have to make thousands of decisions often on even the smallest things about how are we going to communicate this? How are students going to connect with this information? What kind of right now, what kind of technology am I going to use to deliver this information? And we are designers, and this is our craft. So let's take a moment to talk about feedback. And when we talk about feedback, in this particular instance, we're talking about student to teacher feedback, and we're talking about both the direct feedback that you get and the indirect. I know a couple of people mentioned in the chat about sometimes we're getting a lot of nonverbal feedback. Maybe it's questions about assignments. Maybe it's the percentage of students engaging in learning, percentage of students in completing a task. I know often as I've planned out activities and we're in the middle of it and it's not quite going as intended, I'm thinking, what do I need to adjust in my instructions? Or it's going great and I'm like, awesome, I need to make sure that I do this the same time next time. Teacher reflection is huge. We are doing that often, all the time when we're in the process. Here are some feedback examples. It could be when students are asking, hey, I don't know when this is due, or where do I turn this in? Is this for a grade? Now, considering or indirect feedback, meaning it's not completed on time, there might be a lack of attendance in synchronous learning opportunities. So I want to take a minute to talk about the feedback process that we've had at the district level. So we are a huge district. We've got over 20,000 students, and we've received feedback from all of our stakeholders. We've received feedback from students, from parents, from teachers, from teacher parents. And I find myself in that teacher parent group. Often I have a first grade student who, like I said earlier at the beginning, he keeps me on my toes all the time, but it is such a valuable piece of feedback for me to be able to learn through his eyes at that level. So as we gathered all of this feedback over the last 4 months, we had 4 common themes emerge. One was communication, and how we are communicating as a district. Now, keep in mind, this is as a district, how we're communicating our weekly expectations, our daily expectations. The next theme was our course structure and the variance of that between teacher to teacher. And then we got a fair amount of student support feedback, some procedural and some instructional. And so we felt the importance of separating those 2 categories. For the procedural support, our elementary teachers are phenomenal at setting up procedures and routines in their classes. Setting up routines and procedures in your virtual environment is no different, for sure. And many of the supports that we already have in procedurally are so important in our course. But we did feel the need to be able to separate that as a district so that we can focus on, okay, that's routine, that's procedure. No, this is actually instruction. And then for those of you that are on this slideshow right now, this is the actual instructional expectations. And as I'm talking, I think that's the secondary one. I need to put the elementary one in there. This document starts each section, starts with reflection. We have questions that are at the top to help guide where we need to begin our work. So when we're talking about communication and we talk about a daily agenda, do we give kids an idea of what they're supposed to have completed by the end of the day? If that's something that's already in your practice, awesome. That's great. Let's keep moving on. Remember, we're thinking about the user design of an experience. And the other vantage point that I want you to remember, and that this is where our mindset is we're thinking about the learners that are at home that might have the support of an older brother or sister, or might have the support of a working parent. But that working parent also has to do work too, and can't just sit by the student and help guide them hand over hand. And so we are met with a lot of challenges. Don't get me wrong. This is challenging work that we are doing. But so we start each of our 4 common areas with reflective questions to really help drive. Take a second and think, okay, let me think about my Schoology course from the perspective of a virtual learner. And is the communication about my weekly agenda or my daily agenda? And let me get into that. So we talk about the use of Schoology. Obviously, with our virtual learners, we're using Schoology. The notifications. If you're in a PLC group, we do ask that you have your notifications turned on. The reason for that is that it goes to your Outlook, and all you have to do is look in your Outlook inbox. The weekly overview at the elementary level, and I'm going to go with the upper elementary level right now for a second. We are starting to teach our students how to manage their time. Obviously, a 5th grader managing their time versus a 10th grader managing their time are two different scenarios. But at the end, we want to make sure that we can help our students and our parents that are supporting with what is going to be done over this week. And then the daily agenda being, what do I have to complete for today? In looking over courses, I see this already in many courses. Again, we're setting expectations at the district level so we can provide consistency across the district. When we talk about course structure and the folder order, if you consider your course right now, how much does a student have to scroll to get to today's content? Is it at the top, or do they have to scroll a lot? Now we're towards the end of the second 9 weeks here, so they might have to scroll a fair amount. Could we save them a hot second and put that up to the top? The folder organization. Most of us have Monday through Friday folders. Some of us have content folders if we're working out of our homeroom class. But the ask here is that there is a folder structure. I've seen some teachers just have the actual daily folder right there at the top. And so you've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and those are your folders right up there. And then you expand those and you've got your content for the day. Some have folders within that folder. The ask here is that we have a folder structure that it's a one layer that students know where to go. We have gotten a fair amount of feedback about the assignment due dates and names. Teams is our official gradebook. We do ask that the Schoology assignments that are going into Teams be named the same thing. That just helps with, and again, at our upper elementary, when the students are going to have access to the student self-serve portal, we're trying to build some agency that they could log in and say, hey, do I have my grade for this? And then they look and see this is, the mixed fractions activity that we did, and it's named the same thing in Schoology. That just helps provide some consistency. So when we talk about our course navigation and landing page, many people have a fabulous Bitmoji classroom up at the top. I was joking with some of my colleagues earlier. If I were to have a classroom right now, a Bitmoji classroom, I'm not going to lie, would take me about 3 days to do. At the top of my class, I would have a banner with some buttons, something visual that students could click on and get to fast. That is just knowing myself and knowing where my strengths are, and Bitmoji classrooms are not that. But there are so many people out there that can whip out a Bitmoji classroom super fast, and that's their forte. The whole point of that is that landing page, the course navigation includes, how are we going to connect? How do we log into the Zoom? Where can I access these procedural things that I need in my course? Most of you are already having this done. This is a checkbox. Again, we're looking for district consistency across all campuses. These last three are really starting to speak to the student agency piece. When they're in our classroom, when students come in our classroom, there's inherent structure for when, the time, and the space that learning is going to take place, because they're in our class. When students are at home, they don't necessarily have that structure. They don't necessarily have the ask 3 before me poster up on the wall that they can go ask. So that's when we say, like, what do they do when they have technical questions? It's an additional scaffold and support that we provide for our students. And then where to locate additional resources, where to locate missing assignments. All procedures. Where do we find that my Turnitin folder that I have in my classroom? How do I set that up for my students to provide them that structure that they need? I'm getting some encouraging, I should just try it. You know what? I should try out creating a Bitmoji classroom to go through that feeling. But thank you for the encouragement. When we talk about student instructional support, this is honestly, this is our stuff. This is what we're teaching our students. This is really, in my opinion, the most important part. What do we have to teach our kids? How are they going to know it? What are we going to do when they don't know it? I would encourage you, for your videos, make them short, 3 to 5 minutes for asynchronous content. These are available for students when you're not available. So if you can consider things that are good video content that they don't need to hear from you in living color, they could watch it on a video, awesome. Now, keep in mind, our students watch video all the time, but they're not taking notes or trying to process information or take that information and then necessarily apply it in a learning environment. So that's really one thing to consider for our instructional videos. For our instructional resources, these are things like any supplemental aids that we have for students, any anchor charts that we have that we want students to constantly reference back to when they're doing learning. We do have a link here to our Hayes hybrid teaching toolkit on some of the best teaching strategies, practices, I should say. And again, when you get to that website, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I do that one, I do that one, I do that one. Hopefully this is an affirmation of many of the things that you already are doing in your classroom, and how that small tweaks that we can make to make the user experience in the virtual world a little more supported for those learners who don't have the support at home that they would if they were in our classroom. So when we go to our user feedback analysis, we have a sample scenario. It includes direct and indirect feedback that we've received, some causes, some actions we can take on that, and some analysis. So I'm going to start at the top left. This is again just a visual of how the mental process is working. Let's say our students are not turning in weekly work. They have too much work at the same time. Our parents are saying they don't know what to do. So what could be prompting this feedback? Maybe they're not sure what to turn in to complete for the class. Maybe they're having difficulty managing the workload. What actions would we take in response to this initial feedback? If I didn't have a weekly overview, how would that help? Would having a weekly overview show our students, in the big picture of things, this is what we're going to be working on in math and science and social studies and language arts, especially with those items that I really need to see your work on this one. I need you to go ahead and submit this one with those particular items. Now, the weekly overview is an overview. A daily agenda is more specific. A daily agenda would be, could serve as a checklist of things for students to do. A weekly overview is not a checklist. It's just here's your overarching. You might have one major grade in math due this week and a couple dailies in language arts. But that's the kind of overarching high view you would give your students. So once you take that and make that tweak, a week or two later, you say, hey, what's working? Is this helping? Is this not? Are people even looking at this document? That kind of thing. And you might make a revised action or not. Let's say you make a revised action and then you change it into a Google assignment. It's ungraded, but it helps with the flow in your class because students are used to using Google assignments in their class. So that's a short walkthrough of the feedback analysis. Our goal for our second semester courses is using feedback to design an effective and consistent student experience for our virtual learners district-wide. So we have got lots of things going on in our virtual courses, and we want to make sure that we are setting a consistent message across every campus. So next steps from here. Think about some themes that you're seeing based on the feedback you've gotten first semester. Which of the 4 expectations that are outlined in the document would be a starting point to make small adjustments? Is it that you're going to rearrange the folders and maybe you already have your folders with the most current work at the top? That might not be where you focus your work, but consider the 4 expectations that are outlined in the document. There is a template. If you click on this, it's going to force a copy of the feedback template. If you are visual or if you like to write things down, you want to print that out, great. But that is a template to this, just to remind you of the process of that. So let's come back here. What are some of our next steps? We have at the campus support, you've got your awesome instructional coaches. You've got your awesome PLC groups that you work with. At the C&I level, you have your coordinators that can also offer PLC support. You've got your digital learning coaches that can come into your PLC work, your special ed instructional coaches. There is a Schoology help at the bottom right of your screen. It's the S. When you click on it and type in your question, you can get some decent instructions on learning how to do something that you might not have already known. I visit that Schoology help on the daily. And then the hybrid teacher toolkit, there's a ton of information in here. There's a lot of resources on short videos on how to collect work that you could even share some of them with your students. So if you want to put that in your teacher resource section, how do I turn in an assignment? That would be a great place to get that. And then in early February, we are doing a Right This Minute episode for parent communication, kind of showcasing the consistent formats and procedures in Schoology for our virtual learners. We are developing some training to help at the secondary level with the advisory classes, and we can adjust some of this for some of our upper elementary students to talk about time management and how to be able to take a week's of work and kind of pace that out. That's a huge learning skill. Obviously, that looks different at our elementary level than it does at our secondary. But for student communication and self-advocacy as well, for our older kids that have access to the student self-serve portal, that's a great way for them to start understanding, I haven't gotten my grade for this. I turned it in, or how do I ask for help when I need it? All of those pieces of self-advocacy. So that takes us to the end of our training right now. Tracy, are there any questions right now that you think we need to answer immediately, or can we get some of the feedback that we've gotten and send that out via the teacher update?
I think we can send it out. There's one question is how do we get attendance for this meeting? And Emily had mentioned that we will run a report of who logged into this, and we'll put you into Eduphoria, so you don't have to go sign up for anything. We'll run a report to give you your credit for being here.
Yes, yes. So that's why you're now if you are in if you're in a room with people, I would just ask that you put your name in the chat right now so that you can get credit, because obviously only one person's name will appear in my report. But the other thing, yes, and I can, this is another great question, for your daily and weekly agenda formats. I have a template that can be shared. I can share it in your PLC Schoology group, and you can take that Google Doc and adjust it. A trick that I would have there is I would make, just like we did in the spring, I'd make it a Google Doc and I would put the top week. So then you have kind of a running total of your weekly agenda. And that Google, so all you have to do is that link is at the top. I appreciate your time, guys. I hope you have an awesome day today. Please reach out with any questions you have. Thank you so much.
Please remember, if you have questions, to add them to the parking lot, because we will follow up with that